One donkey, thousands of opinions. The morning sun had barely risen over the small village when loud shouting suddenly echoed through the streets. "Run! Run! The donkey is eating Mrs. Martha's cabbages again," people yelled. Villagers burst into laughter as a gray donkey stood proudly inside the vegetable garden with half a cabbage hanging from its mouth. Beside him stood a poor farmer named Thomas and his young son, Leo. The donkey's name was Biscuit. Nobody knew why Thomas gave such a strange name to a donkey, but Biscuit behaved more like a spoiled child than a hard-working animal. That morning, Thomas sighed deeply and said, "Leo, today we are taking Biscuit to the market. We need money badly before this donkey destroys the entire village." After many struggles, broken ropes, and one missing shoe, father and son finally started their long journey toward the market, while Biscuit lazily walked behind them. After walking for an hour, a rich traveler riding a horse passed by and laughed loudly. "You fools! Why are you walking when you have a donkey?" he shouted. Thomas scratched his beard and thought the traveler was right, so he helped Leo climb onto Biscuit while he continued walking beside them. Soon they passed a tea shop where several old men sat gossiping. One old man pointed at Leo and shouted, "What a lazy boy! His poor father walks while he rides comfortably." Leo quickly climbed down from the donkey feeling embarrassed. Thomas worried people would think his son had no respect. To solve the problem, Thomas climbed onto Biscuit himself. "Now nobody can complain," he said confidently. But only a few minutes later, two women carrying baskets stopped beside them. One woman shook her head angrily and said, "What a selfish father! Look at that poor boy walking in the hot sun." Thomas almost fell off the donkey in shock. "No matter what we do, somebody complains," Leo groaned. After thinking carefully, Leo suggested, "Maybe we should both ride the donkey together." Thomas agreed because he desperately wanted everyone to stop criticizing them. So both father and son climbed onto Biscuit. At first, the donkey walked normally, but soon he slowed down and looked completely exhausted. When they entered the next village, people became angry. "Shame on you!" shouted a baker. "You are overloading that poor donkey." Thomas and Leo quickly climbed off again. They sat under a tree, feeling tired, sweaty, confused, and completely frustrated. Suddenly, Leo snapped his fingers excitedly. "I have an idea! If people don't want us riding the donkey, then we will carry the donkey instead." Thomas stared silently for a long moment. "This may be the worst idea in human history," he finally said. But after hearing criticism all day, the idea strangely sounded reasonable. Father and son cut down a bamboo pole, tied Biscuit's legs carefully, and lifted the donkey onto their shoulders. The moment people saw them carrying the donkey, loud laughter exploded everywhere. Children ran behind them shouting, "Flying donkey! Flying donkey!" A fruit seller laughed so hard that oranges rolled across the road. Even Biscuit looked embarrassed, hanging upside down from the pole. When they reached the crowded market bridge, the noise frightened Biscuit. Suddenly, he started kicking wildly in the air. One rope snapped. Leo lost his balance, and the pole tilted dangerously sideways. People gasped in fear. Then came a huge splash. Biscuit fell straight into the river below, while Thomas screamed, and Leo dropped the pole in panic. Thomas quickly jumped into a small fishing boat to rescue the donkey, but he had no idea how to row properly. The boat spun around in circles, while people on the bridge laughed harder than ever. Finally, a fisherman helped pull Biscuit safely out of the river. The donkey sneezed directly into Thomas's face, covering him with river water and green weeds. An old traveler who had watched everything slowly walked toward them and said kindly, "You are suffering because you are trying to please everyone. The old man explained, "People will always criticize something. If you keep changing yourself for every opinion you hear, you will lose your own wisdom." Thomas and Leo finally understood their mistake. After resting beside the river, they decided to stop listening to every stranger and simply do what made sense. The next morning, they continued their journey happily. Sometimes Leo rode the donkey, sometimes Thomas rode, and sometimes they both walked beside Biscuit. They ignored the opinions of strangers and laughed together as they traveled down the dusty road. Moral of the story: trying to please everyone will only confuse and exhaust you. Listen to advice wisely, but always think for yourself and do what is right.